If you're going to work in comics, shouldn't one of the requirements be that you read comics? You'd think so, but hey, this is Perch, and it's tough on topics like this because I can take a super negative route or I can take a positive route. Yeah, often. This one's going to be a little tough to be positive about, but I'll try and lead with the good. We'll lead with the good, and then we'll just slowly slide into the bad, which I think is bad for clicks. By the way, I think what I should do is come out the gate like really pissed off and insulting somebody, and then kind of sneak into some positivity. That's probably a better way to go about it. But I'm all about subverting expectations. That's what I'm doing here. Anyway, so one thing that always surprises me is that, and I don't know why, but it continuously does, is I'll go to cons, or a friend of mine will go to a con, and then there's this common report that we get back, which is, hey, we went to meet some creators, usually not the writers, but usually the editors or the auxiliary staff, the digital staff, just somebody who's not necessarily a writer or an artist on a comic book, but somebody else. And man, they don't read comics. And then I'm like, well, what do you mean? If somebody's telling me this, but I've had the same interaction. It's like, well, I asked about, hey, do you think you'll ever pick up on this subplot from this issue? And if you've ever watched a movie like Mallrats or seen any kind of these parodies of geek culture, Big Bang Theory, or any of these things, it's a common bit that the nerd meets their hero, celebrity, creator, insider, actor, whoever, and they go, it's like the nerd meets William Shatner. This is an old SNL bit, and the nerd's like, yeah, could you elaborate on the I see I can slip right into place, the defensive technique used in EH-413 when battling the Klingons over planet Kadar and the fifth episode, and the actor's like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, that plays out in real life. There's a reason it's a bit, and it's a bit because if you go to cons, one of the things that fans like to ask people in the business about is kind of the various plots or some thread that they really liked. It's always interesting. The diehard comic fans have been in it for 10 years or more. They have these moments they remember. These happy, thrilling. This is the epic moment they remember in comics, and it's not always the popular moment that people remember. It's some panel, some scene, some issue that really did it for them, and they the whole for me, and there's a lot of them because I'm old. But the in Uncanny X-Men, when they did the Storm Forge kind of you know, not romance bit, but there was a couple issues of Uncanny X-Men. It was in the it's before 200. It was in the 180s, somewhere in the 180s, and it was Life Death. It was like Chris Claremont liked to take words and combine them together, so it's like Life Death. And it was Barry Windsor Smith, and it was Storm, it was Forge, and it was like a standalone issue. And there were a lot of scenes in that comic to me that are just epic Storm, and epic Forge. I always felt like Forge got kind of screwed by Marvel. There's a lot you could do with that character that just they didn't. I think, and this is I've mentioned it before of like, hey, you want to have comics with kind of new and diverse characters. Cool. How about Forge? He is an awesome character. It's a Native American, uh, just inventor, can invent shit, knows the science really, really well. I mean, I don't know. I think you could tell a pretty awesome Forge story. I think you could have I don't know. So I don't, I'm not going to change the video around on him. That'll be a video for another day. But anyway, though that's a moment that I remember. But what got me on this tangent is you'll have these moments in comics you remember, and often these moments are kind of open ended. And you'll go to a con and you'll talk to the creator. Again, sometimes a writer. Your writer usually knows what's going on, but you'll talk to the editor. You'll talk to somebody attached to like the X-Men line, since I'm using that comic, and the editor's like, Oh yeah, that was a cool comic featuring Banshee. It's like no, Banshee wasn't in it. What are you talking about? And very quickly you realize that the editor, the person you're talking to, I keep using editor because this has happened to me on multiple occasions with editors and assistant editors. Um, but it can happen with colorists, it can happen with marketing agents, it can happen with kind of people who are helping with the sales. David Gabriel has gotten burned by this like a zillion times, and yet sometimes they still promote out. They trot out like David Gabriel knows more than you, and he's Gabriel's a nice enough guy. I mean he is who he is, but like he's not that deep in knowledge. And if you're going to go into a con with a bunch of hardcore comic fans, maybe don't say, "Hey, I'll bet I know more than you." Maybe that's not the right angle to play. I'm just saying you're setting yourself up a little bit there. But um, as you dig, it becomes aware. You become aware that the editors know very little about the comic history and about continuity and about the stories and what's happened. And I always find that I mean disappointing, yeah, but I guess in your head, and maybe you're like me. Let me know in the comments. But you think in your mind that the people who made it, who get to work for Marvel or DC, get to work with these iconic major characters that you've only dreamed of. You've always wanted to work on these amazing characters, and they don't know the comics. They don't know the history. They know maybe 1 year back or 2 years back. And on one hand, that explains a lot. It explains some of the comics where they don't take advantage of their history. A lot of cases they have a really nice, rich, cool history of characters and things, but they don't take advantage of it. On the other hand, it's like, yeah, but it's your job. I mean, to me, it'd be. I always use this analogy, and I've been told many times by people in and out of the industry it's not a fair analogy. But if you're in a mechanic and you're working in a garage, and your garage was, BMW imports, it's the BMW car garage, and you're there to fix BMWs, and somebody rolls in their BMW, and it's a 2012 Beamer, and you're like, well, I'm sorry, I have only studied the manuals of how to fix BMWs from 2018 and 2019, so I actually don't know how to fix your car. To me, that's always how it feels. It's like your job is to kind of edit, understand the line, be really clever with continuity, and yet you clearly have not read or paid attention to the comics that you have. And the pushback I've gotten back in this from time to time is like, oh, what do you expect? Do you expect somebody to actually read through like 600 comics? And it's like, yeah. I'm sorry. Yes, I do expect that. It's like if you like to me again, it's like going into a restaurant. You're like, you expect the cook to wash their hands after peeing? Yes. I mean, doesn't everyone? I hope. I think that's a reasonable expectation to have if you're going to get a job inside a publisher working on comics, and you should. I think you should. Yeah, I think you should know this. I think you should. I think you should read those 600 comics. I mean, because God knows I've read thousands of comics. And I bet, most of the whales, the big customers who are spending, hundreds of dollars every month on comics, they've read hundreds and thousands of comics. You want their money. Don't you think you should read those comics? And I mean, even more, the tragedy even more is if you're, not a writer, not somebody who's, an IC working outside, but you actually work at a building where you go to work in the building where they have the archives of the comics. I mean, again, this is why the publishers would not hire me, because I'd show up to work, you see me kind of, walk in the front door there with my bag, and I'm all ready for my day of work. And then it's, the people are like, hey, where's Steve at? It's like 10 o'clock. And it's like, oh, he's down reading in the archives again. That's all I do. I'd show up to work and I'd go down there and I'd read comics over and 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 over. That's what I would do. I think isn't that what, I don't know. That's one of the cool parts about working there. So I guess I'm just always a little confused about why people would go work for a place and not actually read the comics, and further confused why they would continue to be employed at a place where part of your job is to edit, curate a line, and you don't have any knowledge of the history. Like I always picture, and I know this isn't the case, but like you're going to work for DC and you're filling out your job application and you go in your first interview, and in tech what's really common is you have your resume and you have your stuff there, but you have what's called the technical interview or the whiteboarding interview, and that's where you go into the room and there's somebody sitting there and they hand you a dry erase marker and they're like, go up to the whiteboard and I want to see an architecture for email queuing. How would you design a queuing architecture that can scale proportionally with volume, and draw it, and then you have to kind of draw some little architecture, and that's pretty common. That's not like a weird interview. That's a common interview. So I always picture it comics like you go to interview and you're there in the room, and somebody's like, okay, I see your resume here. I see that you attended community college, okay, and you have an English and philosophy degree, all right, and you've worked at Kinko's, nice, perfect qualifications for this job. Now, explain to me the plot of X-Men, Uncanny X-Men 175. Who is the artist on that book, and why was Dark Phoenix on the cover? Was she resurrected, or what led Dark Phoenix to be on the cover of Uncanny X-Men 175 when she had been presumably dead, you know, several issues earlier, um, at the conclusion of the Dark Phoenix saga? Please explain. I always have pictured that would be the interview. Um, I went to Marvel there. I should have gone with DC. Yeah, same thing. You're there with DC, and somebody's like, do you know John Constantine? Like, yes, I have watched that show. It's like, okay, nope, you're reject. Just like I don't know. I picture some level of comic knowledge would be a requirement for the job, but whatever. No, as it turns out, though, reading comics is actually not mandatory for working in comics, which again, it's a matter of opinion. I find that profoundly weird. And I also think that when you come across a writer or a creator who clearly has read a lot of comics, it shines through. And a lot of people have said, like, you see there's a lot of comic right now, a lot of comics are getting canceled. Like the comic will show up and then it will run for like 5 issues and then it'll get canceled. And it's pretty common now for the writer to post this kind of eulogy at the end of the comic, like, this has always been the comic I've always wanted to do, and I'm very proud of everything we got done. And if only we weren't cut short, but I told the story I wanted to tell in these 5 issues, and so I leave this happy. And who knows, maybe one day there will be another volume of the uncancelable Wasp that will return to the shelves. Who knows? The future will be bright for Nadia and me because I've got more jobs coming. Um, I always feel, I always feel like, the people who write those eulogies are people. It's kind of a giveaway. These are the people who don't really know the comics that they're writing, or the history. Because like, so you put it this way. So Jonathan Hickman relaunches X-Men, and we're a couple issues in, and it's selling extremely well, top seller, very good reviews, some mind-blowing stuff, changing the whole way that comics have worked, and just amazing stuff. And you don't get the sense that Hickman would write some kind of teary, well, they canceled this comic after 3 issues. You just don't get the sense that he would do that. And you also get the sense when you read the comic book that he has read comics, that he's actually sat down and picked up comics and read them. You get the sense that he tried to digest what he was doing. And you see these charts and things, these timelines that he puts together, and you're like, oh, this guy, at this point, he's kind of showing off that he's actually read the comics. But then you see, you'll see editors and things post stuff, and you're like, what? You're not reading the comics, you're editing. But anyway, that's my perspective. Am I wrong? What do you think? Is maybe Does talent just shine through and reading comics while working comics is not required? What do you think? Let me know. Love to hear your perspective. I'd also love to hear, I would love for a creator to cop to it. I would gain so much respect for a writer, artist, editor, colorist, head of digital strategy. Uh, God, that guy was awful. Whatever. And they do an interview, and they're like, "So, what do you like about the X Men?" And for that writer to just go, "You know what? I've never read any of the X Men. I'm just going to put it out there right now. I've got an interesting story to tell. I'm going to tell my story, but I've never read any of it before. I don't care about what's coming. Just ballsy. Put it out there, just like what they clearly want to say. Be like, you know what? I to prep for this job, I watched the new season of Orange Is the New Black, Handmaid's Tale, Handmaiden's Tale, I don't know, whatever. I watched a bunch of streaming shows. I think I have a pretty good handle on what makes Lobo work, from watching those. And so we're gonna do some Lobo here. Why not? Anyway, hey, let me know what you think about all this. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. Comments below. Your comments are like melted gold from heaven for me. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.